I am fantasy and paranormal romance author Leslye Penelope, and welcome to My Imaginary Friends, a look behind the scenes of an author mapping the worlds in my head and making them a reality. Hello, friends. Today is Friday, November 28th, 2025, and this is episode 253 of My Imaginary Friends. I'm Leslye. As a reminder, you can sign up for the Footnotes newsletter, which includes the show notes for each episode, as well as inspiration, strategies, and ideas to grow as a writer. And that's at myimaginaryfriends.net/footnotes. When you sign up, you can choose to become an imaginary best friend for a few dollars a month and get extra content, discounts, and it's a lot of fun. And I did a whole post on Preptober. And yeah, and I'm formatting all of the transcripts of this podcast as posts now, which is very cool and fun, and I get to repurpose things. So this week's best thing is, well, it's multiple best things. It's nice to have a couple of days off. If you are in the US, happy Thanksgiving. I hope that you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Today is Black Friday, so it's a celebration of consumerism. And we're supposed to be, like, there's a movement to do a blackout, like a purchasing blackout, which I'm here for. I've done a couple of Black Friday, like, choice purchases. I'm actually part of a bundle that's going on, a writing bundle, which I can talk about a little bit later. But first, the reason why we're here, the actual this week's best thing, is that I finished the first draft of my script slash first draft of my story. So, in the last episode, I talked about writing my first draft of my new novel as a script. I'm trying something new and different. And yeah, that is what we're doing. I'm using new software to stream this, so I'm trying to make sure that the comments are working. If someone is watching live, please let me leave a comment, because I'm using Restream, as you can see in the corner, and I don't know how to use it. I think I've used it before, but maybe not. I'm not sure if it's like working the same way as the software I was using before. Anyway, if you were listening to this on audio, just, keep listening. So the first draft, I had notes that I made as I was writing, and as I got a few weeks in. Hey, it works. Okay. Hey, welcome, Sun Spirit of South Carolina. Nice. Thank you for being here. So I will go through the updates that I wrote, like, while I was in it, and then talk about how it went. This grand experiment of doing my first draft as a screenplay. So, like always, like with my normal process of writing in prose as a novel, Act 3 was just a twinkle in my eye for most of the process. Like, this is a mystery story. It's my Black Witches story. And I knew that there was a murder, and I wanted to have a number of suspects. And I knew who did it, but I wanted one of my main character suspects to also be somehow involved, whether knowingly or unknowingly. And I had no idea what was happening. I did not know what character would be involved. I didn't know any of the resolution to that part of the story. And so acts 1 and 2 went pretty smoothly. I was following the process in the book I mentioned, which is usually on my desk, but it's How to Write a Screenplay in 30 days, 21 days. Why have I? Oh, here it goes. How to Write a Movie in 21 Days by Vicki King. And so that went really well. Acts 1 and 2, again, usually pretty decent. So the midpoint, I got to, and I had to do a little bit more work to get to the second half of Act 2. So basically for Act 3, I was writing into the dark, hoping and trusting in my subconscious mind that I would figure out what was going to happen. And what I really like about Vicki King's book that I mentioned is that she supports this process. There is a quote on page 65 that I really liked and highlighted. And is it 60? Oh, 63. As let's say every time you don't know something about the script, you ask a question. This has two effects. A, it immediately identifies what it is you don't know. And B, since you have now identified what you don't know, you are much more able to find out, which I really liked. So it was basically like there's a Q&A section in this book, and it's like, what happens if I don't know what's going on in the story? She's like, just keep writing. write something, either it'll be right or it'll be wrong. Like you'll write something and you'll figure out, oh, that's exactly what it is. Or you'll write something and you'll be like, that's not quite right, but let me just keep pushing forward, which is one of the reasons why I like fast drafting in the first place, because dump out of your idea you dump out all your ideas from your brains, like a huge brain dump. My script writing professor in college at Howard, Haile Grima, he used to say in our screenwriting class, you vomit out your first draft. And as I like the lessons that I learned from screenwriting in college, that I sort of forgot along the way, that I relearned when I started writing novels. But that fast drafting had apparently been taught to me in college, because I do remember Professor Grima saying, vomit out your first draft. And I think I mentioned that before. Um, but yeah, you really do. And that's kind of what this book also says. Just ask questions, like, I don't know what happens next. Well, brainstorm a list of anything that could possibly happen, maybe things that couldn't happen. Like, open your mind, keep going, keep writing, write something, choose one of those things on the list, even if it's wrong. And the process of doing that will help you figure out what's right, which I think is always how it's worked for me. So I always keep a separate list of questions while I'm drafting. So if I don't know something, or if I already know something is wrong, I write it down. I say, okay, like for example, there's a character, the love interest of my main character. His name right now is Lincoln. And, I was like, does Lincoln know this plot, or does he not know this plot? Like, is he in on it or is he not? And I wrote it one way, and then I'm like, I think in the next draft I should change it. But then I just kept writing. And by the end of the draft, I was like, no, I think the way I have it is right, actually. So that's one of the benefits, of course, of fast drafting, with not having to go back and do as much rework, because sometimes you're changing your mind several times during the process. Um, so like I said, in this mystery, I know one of the main characters is somehow involved, but I don't know who it is. And as a plotter, it's really frustrating to not know all of the answers as I'm going, because I'm trying to know as many answers as possible. But I also know that in the first draft, I'm learning the characters, I'm figuring out their backstory, I'm asking questions and answering them. And I trust myself that I will figure it out in the future. And I'm planting seeds right now that will help me. So whatever I'm writing, this, the vomiting out of the first draft, in all of that stuff that doesn't feel right, that feels like, is this even a story that makes sense? There will be the kernels of the ideas that will become the real things that actually do make sense. And, I've done this before, and I have to trust myself, even though it feels wrong every time. Um, the other thing about the script is that there's so much under the surface. Like, I think the core things are there, but I know I'm missing a lot. Um, and so, pro of the script process for the first draft is that I have not all the dialogue, but I have dialogue that hints at the way an actor would portray it. Like, I was trying to stay true to the script writing process. So, and talking to my brother, who's a professional actor, about characters and how do you figure out how to play a character, because all you have is the script, which is basically just the dialogue and a few lines of action. And so, what am I putting in as the writer that an actor would be able to say, oh, okay, this person is whatever, what emotion are they feeling? Are they annoyed? Are they frustrated? Are they sad? Um, you don't necessarily want to put those things in the script. Although, since this is, my process, I did use the parentheticals. So if you've ever seen a screenplay format, inside of dialogue, you can have certain words inside of parentheses. They're called parentheticals. So it's like, if there's multiple people in a scene and character A is saying something specifically to character C, you can say to character C in parentheses, and then that dialogue is for them. Or you can put a little bit of how they say it, if it's really important to make it clear. So I used that a lot more than I would if this was a script for some other purpose, to shortcut the emotions. So like when I'm writing a novel, I don't want to say she was happy. That's very straightforward and like not literary. But in the screenplay, I can put like angrily or frustrated. And then when I turn this into a novel, I will actually do the writing part and create a scene that shows the frustration, show instead of tell. So basically, in the script, I can tell very quickly the emotions. That also helps me speed up this fast drafting process. So I don't have to worry about showing her face and, like, her eyes were squinting. This is terrible writing. Her brow furrowed in place of saying, she was confused. Or you could say, her brow furrowed and she turned her head and looked, askance, or however you're going to describe what confusion looks and feels like, as opposed to just saying she was confused, which is actually in the script. So I'm not writing any mannerisms. I'm not writing all these other things that I actually do put in novels, but the shortcuts that are in there help me write the first draft faster and will cue me to what I need to be expanding on in the novelization. So basically, I just powered through Act 3. I spent a couple of extra days rereading everything, thinking about, brainstorming, trying to figure out all of these questions that I still did not know the answers to. And at the end of that time, which was by, like, this past Sunday, I was like, I need to finish Act 3. I wanted to finish the script before Thanksgiving, and then I had, at that point, 3 days left. So I was like, I'm just gonna write some stuff. And I did. I powered through. I didn't have much of a plan. I had some notes, and I just wrote, and it was sort of pantsed, and it's not right, but it's something that I can fix. It's very hard to edit a blank page. I think it's impossible to edit a blank page. So now I don't have a blank page. And that is a good part of this process. I really enjoyed it. So that was by Tuesday. I think I'd finished. I think I actually finished in one day. I might have finished on Monday. And then I got copy edits back for the new book. And so I had to work on those. And I took a couple days off of this news story. We're talking about 2 news stories. So Zahara Douglas, the book that comes out in 2026, which is called The Inevitable Undoing of Zahara Douglas, which has a cover reveal next week, if you're listening in real time. December 3rd, 2025 will be the cover reveal. So make sure you get on my newsletter so you can be the first one to see it, or follow me on Instagram. Copy edits for that have come back. And so I just split my writing time between this new witch story and the story that is coming out next year. And then yesterday, I moved back into this witch story. Now, my revision process is usually to let some more time pass, like more than 2 days before I start really going through it. But since this is just a script and it's 108 pages, I was trying for 120, and I just wrapped it up in 108 because, again, Act 3 is more of a figment of my imagination than a real Act 3 at this point. I was like, I don't think I need a lot of time away from this in order to start the revision. I want to kind of get through it a little bit more quickly. So the problems that I already know, I didn't do what I intended to do. Like, I have a beginning, middle, and end in this first draft. I have all the characters. I have the basics of the plot. I have the scaffolding of the story. But since this is even more of a bare bones first draft than normal, there's a lot missing. And I've been keeping a list of things I know are missing. I do have to go through it again and figure out, like, I want to say the artistry of the story is missing. I think I mentioned in the last podcast that I'm still figuring out the POV characters. Am I doing all 5 POV characters of my main crew, I guess you could say? Or is it just the 3 main ones that I'm thinking of right now? I'm still making those decisions. I wanna do multi-POV, and I wanted to play around with the timeline. I originally went into this planning on doing a dual timeline story from, like, the early 1900s to current day. Nothing of the early 1900s timeline is in the script right now, and I don't know if I need it. And so there's so many decisions that need to be made. There's so much work that still has to be done. I don't feel like it's that much more than with a normal first draft written in prose, but there is a little bit more, at least. And I guess as I continue, I will find out exactly how true that statement is. But I did so far start plotting out the timeline of the script, because I know I want to play with even the present day timeline. I want to play around with multiple POV characters, where their points of view start and stop in time. So I need to know just have a literal timeline of everything that happens from beginning to end so I can play around with it. And I'm using a program called Eon Timeline. I think it's made by the people who make Scrivener, um, in order to do that. Now, I haven't used this program in a long time. I've talked about it before, and I've known about it, and I've kind of played around with it. But they've added new features since several years ago when I used it, and I think it can work really well for my revision process. So I have this whole revision process where I usually take a few weeks or months away from the manuscript, then come back, reread it, and plot it out in a spreadsheet using something similar to the story grid method. Or basically, I created a spreadsheet you can download on my website at lpenelope.com. I'll put the link in the show notes. And, I just, the scene number, the POV character, what happens, goal, motivation, conflict is often in there, the turn of the scene, like what changes in each scene, the polarity shift, does it go from positive to negative or negative to positive? There's all these things I'm tracking, the setting, the day of the week, because I don't know. When I do my first drafts, I don't care about like how long the timeline is or what day of the week or any of that stuff. That's for revision. So because I do know I want to, again, manipulate time, in Eon Timeline, I can plot each scene on a day of the week. So I've picked just the year 2028, since if I hopefully sell the story in 2026, it probably wouldn't come out until 2028 anyway. I don't know if I'm going to say what year it is in the book, but that's the year I'm using for the calendar. I downloaded some 2028 calendars and I started looking at it on my printed calendar and also in the software. And so I think I've done the first act in Eon Timeline. And so far, it's been very helpful because you can plot it. You can say which characters appear in each scene. You can give a summary of the scene. You can export it to a spreadsheet. So I can do this and then add the rest of my spreadsheet columns in the next pass. And so far, I'm enjoying it, and it's helpful for this particular story. We'll see what happens next. So yeah, that is my writing update. That is how it went. That is how my novel November went. I did complete the first draft. I'm happy with what I did, even though I know there's a long road ahead of me in terms of getting it to be a book or even like a novel draft. My friends were asking me, am I going to revise the screenplay or revise the novel? And I'm going to go directly into novel format now, and maybe at the end of it, revisit the screenplay. So I'll have they're going to diverge, of course, because the novels are much longer. They're much more detailed than scripts and than movies are. And so I don't know if there's a benefit of actually having a clean script. I mean, the benefit is like, hey, I've got a script. If someone wants to option this, I already have that. But, if I option this book, then they'll want their own script, most likely. But as an exercise for me, it has been a success, I will say. So like I mentioned, I am doing the cover reveal for my next completed novel, which comes out at the moment, it's slated for August of 2026. That is The Inevitable Undoing of Zahara Douglas. The cover is very cool. I posted the teaser on Instagram this morning, and yeah, next week, as I record this, it will be out in the world. I hope there will be pre-order links. I'm assuming there will be, but who knows? It's traditionally published. We'll see what happens. That's super exciting. And yeah, that's my Y2K 1999 book that I have been working on forever, it seems like. And that has been in my mind. Well, actually, since I first started that book, writing it like in 2014 or something like that. It's another one of those spin-offs of Angelborn. I'll talk about that probably more. And that it is not anymore. It originated with a character who was in the spin-off of Angelborn, which is what one of my it's a short novel, paranormal romance novel that had a whole life that no one ever saw but me and my brother and maybe a couple of friends, because I didn't finish those books yet. One day. Other things I saw that were interesting. Juno Diaz Substack is the gift that keeps on giving. I will link to his post on the mystery and poetry. This is what I wrote down. It's paid, but you might be able to get like a free post because Substack sometimes gives you free posts. And he talks about mystery, basically, being it's called mystery fiction's favorite force. Mystery and spirit, conflict and mystery. It was a really good post. It was very inspiring for me. And it's like he talks about, one thing that we always talk about, we need conflict to make fiction. That's one of my I had to learn how to create conflict, and I'm still learning it. There's some authors who are amazing. They can torture their characters almost effortlessly. For me, it's still difficult to torture my characters as much as I think I should be. But in addition to conflict, Junot Diaz says that mystery is necessary. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It's like, um, what happens next? We want to keep people turning the pages in our books. And so for the reader, the mystery, it doesn't have to be a mystery, but it's like the intrigue of what happens next. And not just what happens next, but who happens next. So characters who reveal themselves, the character arcs. So it's like, why do people read? People read for characters. They read to learn more about the characters, to discover how they're going to change, how they're going to go from the opening state, which is usually with a lack or a wound, and how are they going to heal that. And he says, quote, a story that, while it's busy giving us the standard pleasures of character, conflict, context, also gestures towards life's ineffability, its unknowability, and our very human, very limited understanding of the mysterium tremendum that envelops us. Of course, it's Juno. He has lots of made up words. I mean, those are probably real words, but I just don't know. So, anyway, um, I will link to that if it's possible for you to check that out and get a free sample of his Substack. It's full of gems like that. Hey, Margaret from California, where it's cloudy and we're still in food coma mode. I am also in food coma mode. I got up this morning after eating, like stuffing myself to the gills yesterday for Thanksgiving, and did like an exercise routine on YouTube for 30 minutes because I was like, yeah, I ate so much. I was feeling kind of uncomfortable. But glad you're here. The other thing, if you are a writer, if you've published anything, you're probably getting these AI scam emails. I get sometimes 8 to 10 a day of these scam emails, which are like telling me how wonderful my book is and how amazing it is, and giving me like details that have been generated from the AI from my book descriptions and from my reviews. Just obsequious, fawning emails that make you feel so good, and then they're somehow, if you respond to them, you will get embroiled in some sort of scam and be scammed out of money. And a friend of mine, actually, who had written a book a few years ago, I think it was a nonfiction book, she forwarded me an email she got because she thought it was real, and it was from James Patterson. And she didn't know who James Patterson was, just wasn't a fan of that genre. She's like, have you heard of this author? And she was like, yeah, this book that I wrote, I didn't think anyone had read it, blah blah blah. And I was like, I hate to burst your bubble, but that's a scam. And I felt so bad telling her that, like, because she felt like, oh, someone is like complimenting my book, and it does feel good. But when you start getting 8 of them a day, and sometimes they're book clubs, and sometimes they're book marketers, and sometimes they're librarians, and sometimes, I mean, there's all different kinds. And so Victoria Strauss of, what is her site called? I think it's Writer Beware. Yeah, Writer Beware blog. I will link to this too when I put up the show notes. Now she has identified, and she gets all these because she has run Writer Beware for many years, and this is a spot to go to see if a publisher is scamming you, or like fake agents, things like that. So it's kind of like one of her first posts on the topic was saying how these were the new Nigerian print scams, and now she always calls it the Nigerian scam, which maybe they're all from Nigeria, but like it just feels like it doesn't have to always be called the Nigerian marketing scam. I feel some type of way about that personally. But regardless, it is yeah, there's several posts on these flattering book marketing scams. So if you haven't started getting them, watch out. They're always from Gmail, although actually sometimes they're from Yahoo, but they're always from free email, but I mean, everyone uses Gmail, right? But so if you're trying to figure out, okay, if this is this a real person? Because you don't want to. I delete them all right now and block. But if it was a real person, you don't want to delete like a real fan or a real book club that's actually inviting you. So how do you know? And I think it's getting harder and harder. But look at the email address. If it's like someone's name and at the end marketer, or and it's got some numbers at the end and it's a Gmail or maybe a Yahoo, have some questions. They impersonate real people all the time, like really big famous authors, James Patterson, Taylor Jenkins Reid. The names go on and on. They impersonate real book clubs. So if you're like, oh, you Google the book club and it actually exists, look at the email and try to see, is this actually the email of the person who runs this book club? Because they are scraping the internet. And these articles have much more information, but they are a huge pain. I just, like I said, I block, I delete immediately. But and hopefully I'm not deleting any real people, but I don't think so. I mean, real people don't fawn in those ways. When real fans write about books, it just sounds more human. There's not a bunch of emojis in it usually, like 20 emojis, like there are tells. But it does take a certain amount of savvy. And if you're not paying attention, then you could easily be scammed. And so if you get to the point where you've responded to them and the book club asks you for money to appear, that's a red flag. If the way you pay the money is through like a Fiverr or some kind of weird, account that has a name that's different from the person you've been talking to, also red flags. So yeah, ring the bell about that one. And then finally, there was an article that I saw on a Substack called Pitch Your Novel. It's called The Case of the Disappearing Author and Why You Probably Don't Want a 6 or 7 figure deal, which for those of you who are interested in traditional publishing is a good read that I will put in the show notes. Margaret says, because we need another task to add to our author business list, right? Yeah, like wading through your emails to see, am I being scammed? It sucks. So one thing about this last article, it breaks down like why you might not want to be a 6 or 7 figure author or get a deal from a traditional publisher for that much, because if you don't earn out, then your chances of getting another deal are significantly reduced. But also the idea that publishing rewards the same. And so a quote that I picked out from that is that she said, I would also add that publishers tend to invest too much in trending genres, causing too many of those books to tank. When hundreds of rom-coms were rolling out, I said to myself, how can an author possibly distinguish herself among hundreds of books that mostly all looked alike and have such similar tropes? And that is the truth. Like, I often say that I was writing romantasy before it was cool. Song of Blood and Stone, I self-published it in 2015. It came out again with St. Martin's in 2018. It is fantasy romance, which is basically what romantasy should be, although I would argue that romantasy now is actually something slightly different. But, it was not as popular in 2015 and 2018, definitely. And I'm grateful that people are loving romantic fantasy and fantasy romance and romantasy and whatever else you might want to call it. But because we've had the huge bestsellers, now we have the clones, and now all the books are the same, and they look the same, and they sound the same, and they have the same tropes, and they have the same subgenres, and all the heroes are the same, and the heroines are the same. And I see people talking about like these books are all the same, and it's like, yeah, because traditional publishers and self-publishers who are writing to market are trying to give you more of what was popular, and that is valid as a business strategy. But like, if you, it really comes back to why did you want to write? Why are you writing? And I'm kind of put off, or both, by writing romantasy now, because it's like I don't write dark fantasy, dark stories, dark heroes. I'm not interested in a lot of those tropes that, when you say romantasy today, it almost feels like it has to be dark. There have to be like elves involved or fae involved. There's certain things that you think of that is different from a fantasy romance, which could encompass lots of things and lots of um, settings and characters. And let me know if you think I'm wrong. Totally hit me up if you have a different opinion about this. But this is what I'm seeing, and I have no desire to write that. Uh, I wanna write what I wanna write, regardless of whether it's trad or indie, and, yeah, that was my main point there. It is sad that everything is the same, and, one other point about, like, AI is that, there's a lot of people who are concerned, me included, about just the ease with which AI can take over all kinds of jobs, not just writers, artists, filmmakers, actors, like everybody. We're all going to be out of work in 10 years, according, if AI goes the way they think it's going to go. But AI can really create the same thing. That's what it does. That's what large language models do. They look at what is out there that they've been trained on. All of these books, my books have trained AI without my permission, and they give you more of the same. So in one way, I think it will benefit those artists who are interested in doing something that is not to market, because that will maintain our humanity. That will prove that we are human because we are not doing the same thing that everyone else is doing. And it's like no shade if you're writing to market. Obviously, writing to market is very lucrative, and that's totally a valid business path. But I think it will be more difficult to stand out writing to market in the future when with more and more content being created by AI. Margaret said, if the government could create a strategic romanticy reserve and price fix, it would. I love that. I feel like there's a lot of genres like that. Um, Also, and I have not done any research on this, but I heard third hand that, traditional publishers, well, I think we all know this, but I heard actually from a third hand from a person who knew a person who knew a traditional publisher, one of the big five, that is actively licensing certain AI things to create books themselves. So when we have traditional publishers who are no longer going to need authors to write books because they are creating their own AI to write the books, they're going to create the AI that are going to write the books that are just like the ones that sold the best. So I'm just reiterating the same point over and over again. Anyway, that is all I have for this morning. I hope that you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And if you celebrate, and I know that there's other Thanksgivings in other countries at other times of the year. When is Canadian Thanksgiving? They have one too, right? Anyway, my next steps. Continue plotting out the timeline of this story. Start my revision. Eventually, I will finish the copy edits of the new book. Again, get on my newsletter if you want to be one of the first, my reader newsletter at lpenelope.com/newsletter to see the new cover when it drops next week. And happy writing. For episode show notes, and to sign up for the Footnotes newsletter to get the show notes in your inbox, you can go to myimaginaryfriends.net/podcast. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, watch the video episodes on YouTube, like this video if you're watching it, email me at podcast@penelope.com. And Canadian Thanksgiving is in October. Thank you. I will talk to you the next time, and I hope that you are having a wonderful holiday season.